welcome to another episode of Laying Down the Lore of the Old World, a lore podcast in which we aim to separate our ghouls from our goblins, our snotlings from our skaven storm fiends, and our bloodthirsters from our bloodletters, and generally ask, what's up with this Warhammer stuff? My name is Ben Crone Barber, and I know fuck all about Warhammer. With me is my co-host, Christopher Crowlin Allen.
Bye. I mean, hi.
Who also knows fuck all about Warhammer.
True. It's all true.
And my dear brother Darren.
I'm on time.
Who knows so much about Warhammer, it's a wonder he has time to do anything else. After gathering online to slay some vermin in the name of Sigmar, this dichotomy between our levels of understanding became clear, and this series is an attempt to address that ignorance.
Hooray!
Bravo! How are we all feeling? Are on time?
Hungover.
We're rested.
Darren's feeling punctual. I'm feeling not hungover at all.
And what are your excuses for both of these states of being?
Well, I got drunk and Kral forgot the podcast was on.
No, wait a minute.
Kral, did you reach 3 beer Kral last night?
Not even, mate. 2.5, and I was asleep by 10.
And I was anybody's.
Yeah, I had a lovely evening last night with friends. Had 2.5 beers. Woo! Mate, I was dancing around my handbag. I was...
Got real red and sweaty.
Boy. Got emotional. There were tears.
Oh, dear. And then you played Crack-a-Holy.
Crokinole, you Philistine. Crokinole. Crokinole is a game developed in Canada, believed to be from the 1800s in Nova Scotia. And it is the best game in the goddamn world, bar none. Anyone disagrees, you're wrong.
I thought it was a way of cooking chicken in Morocco.
Crokinole style.
Yeah.
Okay, today we're going to be cooking chicken Crokinole style. What you
Imagine
need is a crocodile. And
You have to flick a chicken into a hole. Yeah.
no, you have to flick the chicken's hole.
It's Crack-a-Holy chicken served with a side of broken hamburgers in a black plastic bag thrown at you from a 30-yard line.
Welcome to Crocs, Chicks, and Crocodiles. No, it doesn't scan. It doesn't
work. Yeah.
Nah, Darren, just sit down, mate. Just sit down. Go back to bed or whatever it was when
It
you
looks
forgot
like-
it was our recording at 10 a.m. this morning.
I was literally when Ben messaged me, I was literally sitting on the steps in my pants watching YouTube shorts. That was what I was doing.
Going, I'm sure I've got something.
That was me, listeners, less than an hour ago.
You know what? It's so great to be free on a Sunday. I love having nothing to do. Oh, shit.
What day is it? Who?
So Crokinole is basically Tiddlywinks meets curling. Is that right?
Not at all. You got the curling part right. It's kind of like desktop curling and pool or snooker, I guess. Yeah,
Right.
it would be the best way of describing it.
And weirdly, more socially acceptable than playing with toy soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
How odd.
Yeah, I know, right?
Who knew?
Who knows?
You throw 2.5 beers in with that and it gets real crazy.
Oh, mate.
Gets real flicky.
Woohoo! Half the people there were topless by the end of it.
Oh, mate, it was all elbows and knees, mate. It was hard.
It was just fucking.
I've just
People
got a
were
vision of people.
fucking pile driving each other into my dining room floor. Shit got nuts. The Rune of Doom came out.
There was little dwarf ghosts. Yeah.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Right, so from Crack-a-Holy to, it sounds like a really, really tasty pasta dish. From Crack-a-Holy to, you know what?
Hello, Reichland. It's time for the WhatsApp recap.
The WhatsApp recap. When she says time, I just imagine like some like old guitarist like pulling a gurney face, like stretching their.
That was the vibe that she was going for. That was definitely that was her
Jeff
intention.
Beck
I'm
or
sorry,
something.
I'm not comfortable with mocking a child.
That's
Yes, you are.
definitely not true. You
No,
are
he's such a liar.
Your poor children.
Who? Oh, fuck, I forgot them as well. Yeah.
Right, let's recap the WhatsApp recap. Last episode, Jesus, that seemed like years ago, no? It was a Necro special episode. Heinrich Kammler and their
Can't say
nemesis
that.
Braknar, the Damned. The Necroc. Ben, define a Necroc.
It's a vampire bloodline that has necromantic power.
Yes.
Not a necromancer.
Correct.
The most famous Necrarch in the whole of the Old World is known as Krakenol the Damned.
And he's Canadian. Interesting.
He's Canadian, yeah.
From evil Canada.
Yeah.
Kammler and Braknar the Damned, as well as arguably the most evil character in Warhammer Fantasy, Constant Drakenfell. The first part of the episode followed Braknar and Kammler vying for Necro supremacy and going toe-to-toe several times. During this saga, Kammler is imprisoned, escapes, and titles himself, weirdly, Lich Master, as well as separately raising the infamous White Lieutenant of Nagash, Krell, kicking off the much-loved comedy series, Kammler and Krell. Regarding Kammler and giving himself the name Lich Master, how did that happen again? Did he...
Because he mastered a lich called Croven.
That was it, Croven. Yeah.
Croven the
okay.
Lich.
Did he defeat him or just kind of like...
He did, yeah.
Okay, fine. Yeah, okay, cool. There you go.
He was like, who's your master? Who's your master?
Yeah. He smashed him in the head with a rune of doom.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Not in the Crocodile.
Doom. We also learned about Constant Drakenfell, the quite simply dastardly long-lived necromancer who conducted a number of horrific events, including paralyzing a family of royals and having his way with each of them. In an aim to try and be rid of Constant once and for all, the Crown Prince of Oswald leads a group into Castle Drakenfell and appears to defeat the tyrannical necromancer, when in fact it was all a ploy. Constant actually struck a deal with Oswald, who organized a play that was just the facade, easy for me to say, in order to re-raise Drakenfell in front of a VIP audience in order to reign supreme once again. However, Ben, the plan was foiled and Drakenfell was defeated by a playwright and a super-duper hammer that glowed with power, and that was the end of Constant. For now.
Oh yeah, and there was that guy who just kept pulling weapons out of his pants. He was like, it was a playwright, wasn't it? It was like, and now I have a saw and a hammer
Wait a minute.
and a gun.
Umbrella, broom, last week's sandwich. Aha, a hammer.
Fun fact, it didn't actually kill him. It transformed him into sporadic Drakenfells.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah,
Please
yeah.
yourself.
Uncertain Drakenfell.
Temperamental.
Oh, jeez, I thought you were going to say uncircumcised Drakenfells.
Uncircumcised. He may have been. I don't know. I wouldn't.
That would be complete Drakenfells. That's his cousin.
Yeah. He's totally Drakenfell.
So how much of that do you remember, Ben?
I remember all of it, but I was just going to question one part. You said it was when Oswald, whatever his name is, went into
The Crown Prince of Oswald.
Yeah, okay, him. The Crown Prince of Oswald was what I said. Where he went into the place and he killed Drakenfell, but you said it was all a scheme and that he didn't, and that were they in cahoots when it came to
Yes,
that's
right.
I missed that part.
It appeared that the Crown Prince of Oswald came out of the Castle Drakenfeld and would announce that he defeated Constant, and everyone's like, "Cool, let's tear down his castle." But the Crown Prince was like, "No, let's actually leave the castle in place, just as a reminder of how bad shit can get,
of how great castles are."
Yeah, exactly. Of what a great time it was when Constant was around.
So it was all a cunning ruse.
It was a cunning ruse.
It was a...
So Darren, after the play scene, after the playwright defeats Constant, what happens to the Crown Prince? Is he exposed as a traitor?
Well, I'm sorry, you're just going to have to read the book.
I can't read. I mean...
Would it be in an audiobook as well? Are they Most of the Black Library stuff is in audio.
Well, only if you read it out loud and didn't realize what your voice sounded like. Yeah.
Just catch yourself off guard.
No, those books are too old to have been converted into audiobooks because, interestingly, well, first of all, it's even at this time, a dead IP. It's not an IP that's being actively developed, although it is. There's a game coming out shortly, but it's like, Warhammer Legends is really what it'd be under. But also a lot of the older novels had to be retconned into kind of the ever-developing standard lore. I'm thinking specifically of the 40k IP, which is of course great because that's not what this is. But there's a cracking series of novels about an inquisitor called Jack Draco, and they had to be effectively retconned because JD, yeah, it went into he spoke to the Emperor. He ended up as a disembodied spirit in the webway. He had put himself and his immediate staff into hibernation in freezers.
He's achieved a lot in his lifetime. Yeah,
he has. Yeah.
So when you say so when you say retconned, you mean reconciled? Is that what?
No, retconned. Some aspect of them of the books has been judged to be nonsensical. Like it happened in the middle of. They had to take a view on space dwarves. They basically said, right, these guys no longer exist.
Gotcha.
They've been eaten by a Tyranid fleet. And so they didn't have to develop any more lore for that kind of aspect.
I always thought that retconned was...
a sex thing?
Yeah, a sex thing. Yeah. Okay, cool.
I retconned his crokinole.
Dhar, if you had to... You know how it's like so-and-so the Lich Master, so-and-so the Great. If you had to pick a suffix title for Kral, what would it be? Kral the
Goat Plunger.
Kral for Dhar.
But it's not a sex thing.
Okay.
He just has a plunger in the shape of a goat. That's it. It's really quite innocent.
It's a novelty plunger.
That's the name I want. Darren the Novelty Plunger.
A suffix for Darren. Darren the Difficult. That's what I'll call it.
Darren the Timely.
Constant?
And we'll pass on me. So, Dhar, where are we going with the content?
We'll do one each for Ben.
Okay, right.
Whoa. This is backfired.
Ben the Spreadsheet Master. There you go.
Love it. I'll take it. And your contribution, Darren?
Oh,
I've got a funny feeling. I'm just going to say this. I've got a funny feeling I'm going to go with Chris's.
It's going to be the lesser of two evils.
Almost certainly.
Ben the Questioner.
That's boring.
I don't know. Actually, that's a pretty good contender.
That's the politest one I could think of.
That was very polite. I could see the bit at the back of your brain moving as you cycled through all of the ways that could possibly hurt.
All right, okay. Ben sits on the toilet too long and his legs don't work.
There it is. Okay, I'll go with that one, you son of a bitch.
Anywho.
Right, now, moving on. Where are we going? Where are we going this episode?
That is a fantastic question. Not even I know, really, if I'm being honest. This episode, we're going to have a look at the greatest crossover since Pirates of the Caribbean. That's right, undead pirates.
Oh,
so we're looking at the crew, the denizens, the people that live on the Vampire Coast, aka the Zombie Coast. This is in Lustria, so it is in... How would you describe it? Where would it be exactly in our own world?
Lustria.
Evil Florida. Evil Florida.
God's waiting room.
Or / Florida.
Ooh, I feel some swashbuckling coming along. Hold on, let me get my swashbuckling pants on. Okay, I'm ready. Go.
Okay, so it's really no coincidence that at the tail end of 6th edition of Warhammer Fantasy, they brought out a handful of characters, just a handful of models to put in units of zombies that were, you would be probably not too out of line saying that they were directly taken from Pirates of the Caribbean. So you had a vampire pirate, a
Spack Jarrow. That sounds very dodgy, doesn't it? Is that allowed?
Oh my god! Yeah.
I don't believe you're allowed to call them that anymore, Chris.
Oh dear, that was a spoonerism, wasn't it?
Spack Jarrow. Is that like a finishing move in Crokinole? You have to shout it at the top of your lungs as you flick. So there was a vampire kind of commander figure who looked like William Shakespeare after smallpox.
I thought you were going to say William Shatner. That would have been awesome.
Zulu, do we have Warp 9?
Yeah, but it's later in life William Shatner. So it's so bloated with stuff hanging off of him, and he's also undead. So he had a big, this ugly looking vampire had a big neck ruff, you know, the kind of weird collar that people at that time had to, I'm going to guess, to catch food or to stop them looking at the horror of their own body because they couldn't see. It's like a cone for a dog.
The cone of shame.
The cone of shame. So yeah, 6th edition, you had a kind of mini campaign set in Lustria, and one of the kind of mainstays of the Warhammer lore in Lustria was the zombie coast. So you were able to add these undead commanders, these undead pirate captains, to units of zombies, and so thematically they would represent these zombie coast zombies. These pirates were originally based out of Sartosa. I'm specifically talking about this little kind of campaign that came on. And that is in Tilia, which is this kind of pillar of rock in the middle of an ocean off the coast of Tilia that has been surrounded by more and more kind of weathered ships, and they've been turned into houses and homes. And it looks like a hive city, for our 40k listeners, of ships. Mr. Chris.
A couple of questions just on the rock out of Tilia. Like Gibraltar Rock, is that kind of region? If you were to,
that kind of ish area.
Like the Strait of Gibraltar.
No, it's more a kind of standalone pillar of rock that has been then kind of hived by both the living and the dead and the mutant, kind of a pirate city.
Gotcha. Second question, it was more like just querying the location of Lustria. You explained it as being probably like Florida. I always thought Lustria was kind of like the south tip of America, of South America, rather than North America. You know what I mean? Southeast.
Oh, actually, do you know what? You may be right. I may have gotten it wrong.
So you're talking, what's the southern tip of South America?
So you're talking Shitdarn. Is that basically what you're?
If the cap fits,
no, you're right to call it out, because I got momentarily confused because of my punctuality. The zombie coast, or vampire coast as it has come to be known, is the kind of the bottom curve of Brazil. So the bit that sticks out into the Atlantic, just that kind of as you come round the corner as you're heading south. For Brazil.
Okay, that's the vampire coast. So you're talking like
the vampire
in
coast.
South America.
Yes, absolutely in South America.
The east coast of South America is what you mean.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Should we start the record again? Just so we.
Yeah.
Are you gonna? You may touch on this in a moment, but is there? Whenever I've heard speak of the zombie coast before, I always wondered why it was over there. Like most of the undead seem to be in the kind of empire side, you know, in what would be kind of continental Europe. Why Lustria?
There is a single and specific reason why Lustria, and we will actually cover that shortly.
Fantastic.
So what I would say is that after the kind of little mini campaign for 6th edition, it kind of fell away into the lore. People could do vampire armies that are set in, or vampire armies that are members of the kind of vampire crews and zombie coast and zombie pirates. But it's really only a kind of, how would you describe it in computer game talk? A skin. It's really just, it's a conversion. The look of it, they would still count as a regular Vampire Count's army. It's really only the advent of Total War 2, Total War Warhammer 2, where the faction gets really well defined as a standalone faction, where it now has commanders and infantry units and war machines, this kind of thing. Very little cavalry, which is weird for a naval-based... No? Yeah.
Bring on the horse boat.
Yeah, it's that classic, the joke about we played 3 chukkers of water polo and 17 horses drowned. Yeah. Please yourselves. So it wasn't until the computer game where it really became defined as a faction, as a standalone faction, and it continues to be that case. There isn't a rule set for the Vampire Coast. There's no official rule set for a Vampire Coast army of the undead. It exists in totality within Total War Warhammer 2, and I suspect soon 3.
So there's no models for the faction as a whole. There's just these the kind of hero characters or the commanders you mentioned before. Are they still in print or
no? They're no longer in production.
Right, okay.
So really, it's going to be conversion after conversion. That's really the only way that you will see these guys on the tabletop. Just to kind of give them a brief description of the faction before we go into their origins, they are literally the undead crew from the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie. That's the core of the idea behind it. Except they are constantly undead. They're not necessarily... They don't look normal when they're not in moonlight.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So they're just... Okay. It's just bog standard zombers and the various other forms of troops.
They're perma-ugly.
Perma-ugly.
Perma-munters.
Perma-munter.
Permuntus.
That is definitely going to be my new tag on online dating. Like,
no, I've got another one. Minge wraiths.
God.
Cock zombers, yeah. The whole, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
Really, Ben, your question earlier touches it with a needle. How it came across was down to one being. And that being is, of course, Mr. Bean. No, Luthor Harkon, who is a vampire count, ostensibly of the Blood Dragon bloodline, given his last name. However, it's completely unknown. It's not particularly documented which bloodline he belongs to. His origins
I remember
as well.
You talking about Luthor Harkon. He got smuggled aboard a Chaos pirate ship, didn't he?
That's exactly right.
Hey.
Yay!
I can't remember when you spoke about him. It was, yeah. Give me some arbitrary points. I'm just trying to think when you explained it. Anyway, it sounds like you're about to fucking move on to him anyway. So yeah, I'll shut the fuck up.
Okay. You will get 6.5 points.
I'll give it 7.5 schmirkles.
Schmirkles. So Luthor Harkon, even he can't remember exactly how he started, where he originated from. There's all evidence points to kind of 2 broad concepts of his origins. The first being that he's actually from Nehekara. He existed at the time of the vampire courts of Lamia. He was referred to as Luthor, L-U-T-R, of the Harkoni, which was a barbaric tribe that lived within Nehekara in the hills towards the north. And so at some stage, he became vampiric and then began his inexorable rise to power. It should be noted that there is no mention of him in records at all until the mid-800s of the imperial calendar. So he would have existed for about 3,000 years before that case. Mr. Chris.
You kind of just answered just then, like, how old is he? You say he can't, even Luther himself cannot.
Yeah. No.
He can't remember his own origins. He's like, I don't know where I'm from. Wow.
Yeah.
Is there a reason for that?
There is, and we shall cover that in the episode, yeah.
Okay, cool.
The second theory of his origins is that he was at some stage in the 500 AS to 600 AS timescale for the imperial calendar, AS being after Sigmar. He rose to prominence as a necromancer in the eastern provinces of the empire. They assume it's an eastern province because he speaks in that, he has that accent.
He has a Scouse accent. You're right, mate. Yeah, I'm from the east. Calm down.
He speaks with a very thick Eastern European accent. That's what we would recognize it as. And so the idea is that he rose to prominence in the Eastern Empire and was at some stage vampirized and then continued on his merry way through history. Those are the thoughts, the two main thoughts on his origins. He's either several thousand years old or 1,500 years old. You know, that kind of idea. He's not, there's quite a gap in his understanding. Now, either way, he remembers that he was quite an accomplished magician, quite an accomplished necromancer. And indeed, while he was human, he studied kind of general witchcraft as well. This is thousands of years. Either way, this is, 2,000 years at least before the institutions of the colleges of magic. So these are the hedge wizards, the kind of wise women, that kind of idea of local magicians and healers and alchemists and that kind of idea. Mr. Chris.
I've got a lot of questions today, don't I? General witchcraft, like, is that a legit subject of several subjects? Like when you're picking your GCSEs, general witchcraft, wizard economics.
Yeah. Yep. So witchcraft is just kind of a general hold-all for non-specialized magic. So it's the idea that you have some capacity to be able to magically heal or magically kill or magically transform or create generic kind of illusions. It's not as...
It's the general studies. Exactly
right.
Subjects.
It's not, It's not as focused as necromancy or demonology or elementalism, that kind of idea. It's a kind of general magic use. And when he was transformed, he remembers that he got when he became a vampire, he remembered that he got an enormous boost of magical power, like a winds of magic enema. Gave him a lift to.
Sounds refreshing.
And then again, it touches on the topic we were discussing last episode, which is does ability at necromancy automatically transfer over when you become a vampire? If you go from just a bog standard guy and you get bitten by a necrarch, will you always gain magical ability? And the short answer there is almost always. But because Harkon's from an unknown bloodline, we're not sure whether he had, how would you describe it, advantage in bringing his skills with him, because it does seem to happen at absolute random on a case-by-case basis. As Chris alluded to earlier, in 876 Imperial calendar, his sarcophagus, which is an interesting point when we think about which of his two origins he had, it's not a coffin, it's a sarcophagus, was captured as it was being transported up the coast of the empire. It was captured by Norscan raiders. So these are, low-level chaos worshippers, evil Vikings, who took command of the ship and pillaged it, brought his sarcophagus on board, and unfortunately, that evening, they all started to fall sick one by one. Over the next few weeks, they one by one fell ill from a wasting disease, which turned out that they, in fact, had kidnapped a vampire. Now, if you're going to kidnap someone, maybe a halfling. Just start out easy, do you know?
Sarcophagus are heavy as well, right? They're like solid stone. Yeah. That's not just like a quick like smash and grab, smash and dash.
What did they think it was? Did they know that it was a coffin of sorts?
Well, this is my question. It's not noted, but it's like, would you not have a look in? If it's as heavy as a big stone sarcophagus, would you not kind of prise the top off and see if you could get whatever's inside?
Yeah. Like if you need to like move a sofa or something, you take all the cushions off, take the legs off. Do you know what I mean? Like bring it down to its component parts, and also check whether there's any vampires inside.
Yeah, I mean that should be like second or third on your list. Yep.
Yeah.
A reasonable explanation must be like it was the result of a night out, really heavy night out. We've all been there when you're a uni student. You wake up and you've got a coffin just like at the end of your bed. You're like, what the fuck happened?
And it's got a traffic cone on it. You're like, exactly. I don't even remember where the traffic cone came from. Where did the sarcophagus come from?
I have a relevant story. I have an actual relevant story to this.
Shut up.
We used to do lodgings for students when I was a kid. I mean, I say my folks. And there were some students there. And I can remember one morning waking up and there was a 6-foot papier-mâché dragon's head on my bed. I was like,
it was like
what
a shit message, like from the Godfather.
The dragon mafia are after me.
Yeah, exactly. It was a shit D&D version of the Godfather.
So this ship, they have this kind of, the crew start dropping one by one, but because there's not enough of them to steer the vessel, it gets kind of blown off course and gets blown past the shifting isles of Ulthuan and comes to land on the relocated and renamed Vampire Coast at the bottom of evil Brazil. And no, the bottom of good Brazil. And, Brazil. And
no, wait a minute. Northampton.
I'm self-censoring as I go. As he lands, Harkon raises the bodies of the dead Norscan raiders, who end up becoming the first zombies of the aforementioned zombie coast.
So was he just emanating some sort of disease then? Was it just coming from him? They all started falling ill. What were they falling ill from? Was it him going, right, now you're all undead?
No, he was drinking them.
Oh, I see. Right, okay. So he was kind of coming out of the sarcophagus and then having a
sneaky sucky.
Yeah, and then going back in. But they were all just forgetting that they'd been bitten and then they were falling ill. I mean, how?
Well, I mean, he does have magical powers. He could have some sort of vampiric rohypnol move. And so they just...
I love it when Darren gets all this kind of self-righteous mode. Like, he talks as if, like, where's the fucking vampire?
Like,
and he's got magical powers. I'm like, all right, Darren, you want to be the one teaching us, buddy. We're the...
I mean, to be fair, a lot of this can be worked out from context, lads. Come on.
Have you met us? No, it can.
Episode about vampires. Vampires famously drinking people. No, but
yeah. So vamp hypnol. Ergo.
So just for absolute clarity, this wasting disease that they were falling in, it was actually Luthor just
anemia
sneaking out of his sarcophagi. And
yeah. So it wasn't just like a batch of bad water biscuits. Like they were. They were getting munched on.
All right. Okay. So they were involuntarily donating blood.
Okay.
That's
they did not
happening.
Consent. Okay.
And so they got
non-consensual blood givage.
So many jokes. Upon landing on the coast of Lustria, he is keenly aware of a huge glut of magical power in the area.
Is that the collective term for magical, a glut?
No, it just means a lot.
Okay.
a blockage of magical power. So what you have to understand about Lustria is it is rife, I say, with geomancy. So with ley lines, as we would call them in our own world, these kind of magical lines of power that connect kind of hubs and vertices from one to another, and it goes around the world. Now, on many of these central hubs, the Lizardmen, or the Old Ones, instructed the Lizardmen, the Slan priests, to build temple cities on those points. So a lot of these points have, as well, cities, I suppose, on them, and these are like magical sponges. So it brings magical energy in, which is then directed by the Slan priests to various parts of the world that needs it. Mr. Ben.
You said geomancy. Firstly, cool word. Secondly, are there geomancers? And thirdly, what does that involve?
They go dowsing with like coat hanger wires in little old spools of cotton, and if they cross, ooh, we found magic or some shit.
That's close. It's very close. You're thinking of hydro twats.
I think you're thinking of geomancer.
Oh no, that's when they try and find water, isn't it? Sorry, dowsing for water.
Dowsing,
Excuse me, I'm an idiot.
Oh, so geomancy is magic to do with geography. That's magic to do with the earth. And so in terms of geomancers, there are certain spells that within high magic and dark magic which can, in some cases, literally move mountains. Cool. The masters of it are really the Slan, who of course all live, well, except for a handful of cases, they all live in Lustria. And part of the history of the planet is, you'll recall that the Old Ones adjusted the orbit of the fated place, as Warhammer World is known. But then they kind of rearranged the continents. And so there were many civilizations that were just simply drowned out of existence when their habitat was descended to the floor of the ocean. There is a Slan priest called Mazdamundi who caused the split of Lustria and the Southlands. So South America and Africa, they are obviously originally joined, and Mazdamundi used his geomantic ability and split the continent into two and put one on one side of the world and the other on the other. Yes, so it's very easy to underestimate the power, the kind of story power that the Slan have in the lore. There are immense wizards with confusing and slightly erotic powers. Moving on, I'm taking no questions. So Harkon then understands that, or comes to understand, he is in a land of supreme magic ability, and he wants that power for himself. He wants to take control of some of these artifacts, and if he can conquer a city as well, wouldn't that be great? So he begins a campaign driven by his own pride and his greed to take over Lustria and make it his own. He gets a great sense that in the city of Hotel, there is a series of vaults within which he senses are artifacts or bound spells that he can use to augment his own capacity, his own ability, and thus become even more powerful and take over more of the continent of Lustria and continue his undead reign. All this time, he is effectively killing any primitive human he comes across. He heads into the city of Hootle, with his ragtag band of daring do zombies.
He tootles into hootle. Sorry.
He hootle pootled, and he comes across, not literally, an ancient vault covered in glyphs, covered in these Lizardman glyphs, with some golden plaques on them, signifying some aspect of them is related to the great plan of the old ones. He tries again and again to, let's use the word penetrate, the defenses of the vault and get into the, what shall we
Vault.
say, the
Vault.
Kinder Surprise in the middle. He is unable to, sadly, because the defenses, these plaques, were put there to defend against far more accomplished wizards than himself. These were specifically put in place to stop demonic entities and chaos sorcerers from getting in, because they're tied in some fashion to what is the elf webway, or sorry, the elf way stones way. No. I forgot what the fuck it was called.
You want to have another try at that?
I will have another try at that. These cities and the ley lines, the kind of geomantic energy, are tied in some way to the High Elf Waystone network, which both powers and protects the Great Vortex at the heart of Ulthuan. And so these vaults contain artifacts and items, and yes, those mean the same thing, that would damage or allow an evil sorcerer to corrupt some aspect of the Waystone network. These defenses are triggered and it shatters his sanity.
Wow.
Literally like hitting a mirror with a hammer. He ends up with multiple personality disorder. So he is a vampire with a fractured sense of self. But also, as it did this, a secondary effect of the defensive magic around this vault stripped him of his connection to the winds of magic. And not just took away his ability, it made him, in effect, a negative wizard, the opposite of a wizard, which is not a wizard. It's someone who radiates a kind of nullifying field of magic around them.
Oh, wow.
So,
like a pariah.
Yeah, exactly like a pariah from 40k for souls. So spells don't work on him. Magic items, if he's holding them, they turn into just the ordinary version of whatever the item is. So a magic sword is just a sword. He has no capacity to use magic at all, and there's some evidence that he doesn't even, or he no longer even understands fully what magic is and how he used it in the first place. So he is almost irredeemably insane. Oh yeah, it's definitely a kick right in the personalities. He's under constant siege within himself from aspects of his own personality. So there will be times where he literally sits still while the different aspects are trying to battle for control of the body. So it's almost like the kind of ultimate Hollywood version of someone with multiple personality disorder, if you know what I mean. It's not how it works in the real. Yeah.
And I'm guessing that if like a kind of chaotic or a demonic magic user attempted to get into that temple or whatever it was that had the plaques, their defense would have just been like a repellent to them. It wouldn't have had the same effect. It was because he was way less powerful than their intended target that it like absolutely rinsed him.
I think almost the opposite is true, because he was made of matter. He's dead, but there's a physical presence there. That's what stopped him from actually just being destroyed completely. Because these vaults are shielded against demons, and a demon is almost pure magical energy from an aspect of a larger demon, and thus from the various chaos gods, that if they had been struck with that, they would have been wiped from existence, rather than being banished back into the realm of chaos, which is the 99.99% of all exorcisms do that, it would have destroyed the energy itself of which that demon is comprised.
Bamfed him out of existence.
Yeah, bamfed. Exactly right. There would just be a cloud of blue smoke and a vague smell of asparagus. That's, as I understand it, that's what happens when Nightcrawler bamfs.
Yeah.
So depending on which personality is in charge, which aspect is in charge, really informs which sort of abilities and skills he has dominant at that time. But regardless, he understands that he needs to search for a cure. He needs to try and make his sanity whole so that he can continue his masquerade of undead swampness. I ran out of steam on that one. I had nothing. Yeah. Mr. Chris.
I mean, definition of insanity. Actually, I don't. I'm not even going to pretend I know what the definition of insanity is. But part of being insane
doing the same
is
thing over and over and expecting different results.
There's that as well. But the fact that you probably don't know that you're insane, so there's some sort of there still seems like a little glimmer of sanity there, that he knows he needs to achieve something, and he knows the reason why he can't achieve it, and he has to solve that by pulling himself together again. So he is aware that he's bonkers.
He's like, mate, I am fucking cuckoo. I need to do something about this.
I know I'm not meant to be wearing these gloves on my feet. I know it. I need to do something about this.
And these underpants make a terrible hat, but I'm doing it. I'm doing it.
I mean, the implication from what you're saying is that he did an unexpected and really aggressive handstand.
He just cartwheeled into his wardrobe and came out the other side. Just hello. I was like, do you know what? This looks great. I'm gonna roll with it.
And kill anyone who gainsays me. Yeah.
Are you a vampire admiral in need of a specialist? Be it bosun, navigator, or deckhand, your first port of call should be Trademark Naval Recruitment. At Trademark Naval Recruitment, we specialize in making your needs our commands. We seek out the best candidates from all the kingdoms of the old world and kill them. Methods of murder can be specified, or we can simply drown them in their own blood. Once the candidate is dead, we arrange reanimation, outfitting, and shipping to your destination of choice. Trademark Naval Recruitment operates discreetly in all major ports. Simply ignite a disembodied torso in your crow's nest, and our representative will possess it and take your order. Trademark Naval Recruitment. From graves to waves.
He begins to understand what he needs to get. So there's some aspect of this spell that decimated his sanity and his magical ability. He got some insight from that, which still exists within him, where he knows roughly which artifacts he needs, but he also needs the kind of mummified remains of one of the Slan, of one of the kind of first or second generation. Which generation eludes me at this moment in time. The most obvious contender is the Slan Lord Croak, who, that's the name of the giant brain frog, Lord Croak.
He had a choice of which mummified remains he could use. He was like, that's the best candidate right there. He's inspected all the mummified remains.
He went for the punny one, yeah. So Lord Croak is in fact dead, but also in a weird way alive. So his very much like the Emperor of Man in 40k, his body is dead. It's been mummified, and it's still sitting on this great palanquin, which is this hovering.
The Imperium of Man, not the Emperor of Man.
No, I'm speaking about the Emperor of Man, not his empire.
Shut up. No, you weren't.
Yes! Nerd. Where the body is dead, but the spirit still clings to it, still inhabits it. And
Rattles
so
around inside it.
Yeah, right. Like a pea in a whistle. Now, I'm not implying that Harkon needs to blow Lord Crow. That's not what I'm implying at all. However, I mean, it's on the list
did it anyway.
of things to try. Yeah.
But only because it's sterile and he likes the taste.
So he begins to get together his kind of his lead lieutenants and sends them off on missions to try and capture these specific artifacts or to get information relating to the future capture of these specific items. This leads him into enormous conflicts with the Lizardmen, obviously. So a couple of notable campaigns. One was the invasion of Itza in 930 Imperial calendar, where he is his forces are repulsed as they're trying to get into the city to grab one of these artifacts. And it's repulsed by a slan and a what's referred to as a croxagore, which is an enormous walking crocodile. Hey, look at that. It links back, Chris. An enormous walking crocodile.
Crocodile.
Sorry. No, all crocodiles walk. An enormous bipedal crocodile, referred to as a croxagore, who walks around with an enormous obsidian mace. And so his advances were rebuffed militarily, not sexually. He was forced to
Could have been politically.
Beat them off with an obsidian hammer.
Obsidian Hammer sounds like a rival nightclub to Black Crag. Obsidian Hammer is the hardcore S&M nightclub.
You can't get in unless you're wearing leather. And something on you needs to be chained to something else on you.
And or someone else. Yeah. While these various campaigns are happening, we're seeing the kind of colonization of Lustria by the Old Worlders, by fleets from Tilia, Estalia, by Norscan fleets coming from Norska, and also by the Empire. So you get these little colonies being set up on the coasts of Good Brazil as these various other empires are trying to make inroads into Lustria usually for trade and so forth. But upon landing, they all ultimately are attacked by Lizardmen forces who just want to keep everyone away so they can protect their kind of magical hubs. And as these ships are arriving, a fair few of them are met by a growing fleet of undead crewed ships, which tend to decimate whichever forces they come across. So this is really where you start getting the kind of zombie pirates coming to the fore. As the kind of newly minted, technologically advanced, in quotes, Western Old World are colonizing Lustria, you see a significant number of black powder weapons, both pistols, rifles, cannons. But you also see, because they're colonizing, they bring with them civilians or snacks, as vampires would call them. But also like the livestock and the associated vermin and what have you that come with that. All of which are affected to some degree by the kind of background magical radiation of Lustria itself. So you start seeing larger rats come into play, some of which are in fact Skaven, who have, of course, tunneled over. So you're talking about the clan Pestilence. Mr. Ben.
When your man, I forget his name, the one who lost his
Luthor Harkon.
Luthor Harkon. Yeah. When he arrived, the rest of the crew were undead. Is that right?
Yes.
Or were they were undead? But they're not undead in a kind of controlled by a necromancer way. They were undead in a vampire way. Is that right?
Which is exactly the same way. It's necromantic control, whether it's done by a necromancer or by a vampire.
Okay, so follow-up question. When he tried to get into that place and the plaques fucked him up, what happened to his control of the undead crew?
Fantastic question. It still remains in terms of the zombies recognize he is a vampire, but they are sustained by the kind of background radiation of magical energy within Lustria. That is not to say that they are as sharp as they would be if he was able to exert full necromantic control over them. But he is able to act through other vampires and other magical beings who have some control over the undead.
Gotcha.
So
cool.
There's the kind of full panoply now at current time in on the Vampire Coast. There is a fairly well established undead empire with all the kind of various troop types you would expect, and some of the more surprising ones that you wouldn't expect. With all this traffic going around and his capacity to be able to take over some of these ships, he gets a larger fleet. But he also institutes, just before the kind of Great Black Plague in the Empire, what's that, 1111? So about 100-ish years before that, he casts an enchantment over the whole of the coastline of what is now the Vampire Coast. And that magical kind of area, a form of geomancy, I suppose, forces ships that get caught up in it to wreck and thus drown all the crew and passengers, who are then automatically raised as, any minute now, zombies. He does this through necromancers and through vampiric lieutenants because, as we've said, he has not only no magical ability, he has anti-magic ability. Mr. Chris.
So how is he communicating and delegating these magical responsibilities to his necromantic subjects without nullifying them at the same time?
Email. Undead email.
All right.
No, he gets them all in a room, tells them what he wants to do, and then he retreats to a safe distance. and then they do it.
It's not permanently nullifying them. It's just his aura.
No. Exactly right. Yes. Apologies if that wasn't clear earlier.
Does that not fuck with the necromancers in like kind of their mental state, or is it just kind of like you just forget to ride a bike? It's as innocent as that, and then when you leave the room, you remember how to ride a bike again.
You're like, a bike.
But it's mostly jungle.
My kingdom for a road.
Think of it as effectively you've got a remote control that when you move into a certain room in the house runs out of battery, and then when you move out of that room, the battery is somehow back again. That's what it's like.
Yeah, right.
He then, with this kind of renewed force of zombies and vampires and other specialized troops, he begins a campaign into a city called Axolotl. I mean, these names are great. In the very early days of Warhammer lore, there was a lot of comedy names for Lizardmen, and there's one at the end of this kind of bit of lore, which is mwah. It's so stupid. But yes, so he invades this city in an attempt to get its geomantic energy and add it to his own power. And ultimately, this makes him a huge target for Slan priests, because he's been an annoyance up until now. The general defenses of a city have been able to keep him at bay. But with his almost complete conquering of this city, all of the Slan in the network, in the network of cities, suddenly are keenly aware of the dire threat that's now happening in the Vampire Coast. And thus they begin in earnest campaign after campaign of forcing these vampires and their undead hordes back into the sea. And so you get a lot of hot Lizardman on zombie action in that part of the world.
I knew you were going down that route again. That's definitely something you want to look at on an incognito tab.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, and this episode is sponsored by NordVPN. No,
Yeah.
The way
I've just seen
that
something on your history.
the way that and how often Darren goes on kind of like these sexual kind of innuendos and stuff, you could mistake Warhammer Fantasy as like a carry-on film. You know,
yeah.
you really could. Oh, matron.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah,
A little bit
most
of
of the-
zombie on something action. You know what I'm saying?
Most.
Well, how's your father? How's your zombie?
Yeah, no, most
How's
of
your
the
zombie
baddies
father?
in my head are
Helmet?
either Kenneth Williams or Sid James. That's the two I have in my head. Very occasionally, Barbara Williams. The dangers of the Vampire Coast are communicated back to the old world by the various colonies and trade organizations that are attempting to exploit Lustria. In 1492, there is a renewed push to get... What are you smirking at? What are you smirking?
It's just you just reminded me of oh fucking hell, George Dawes. You know George Dawes from Shooting
Yeah.
Stars? When they did the renewed version, he did this song and he's like, in 1982, I invented the shoe. In 1982, and so on and so forth. Sorry, that was so pointless. I don't know why. That reminded me.
Oh, I'm really pleased that I asked that question.
So am I invented the flu, which grew and grew and grew. I apologize to you. Chew. Have a tissue.
Yes, so in 1492, I had a poo. While watching the shmoo. Yeah. With this renewed push about the fleets coming back, not about my poo in 1942, we're coming back to Lustria. Harkon used not only the dangerous waters, the magically enchanted waters around the Vampire Coast, but also his own naval superiority to begin to exert his influence over these colonies and over these fleets, and in some cases on specific captains of ships who were, how would you describe it, dark-hearted, the more mercenary and evil and piratical captains of these ships began to ally themselves with the pirates of the Vampire Coast. And it was at that stage he began handing out these ebony skulls. So these are very much from, if you can remember the story of Pirates of the Caribbean, these are like the coins that if they hit the water, they send out a signal. So these skulls, which are also gilded, if the captain holds it and communicates his need for allies, very quickly a fleet of ships from the Vampire Coast will arrive. So it's effectively, what would you describe it? An undead life alert bracelet. So if you,
SOS kind of scream out,
hits a button, you hit a button, and suddenly zombies.
It's an undead rape alarm.
Wow.
Moving on.
Ben.
Nope.
Jesus.
I simply meant in its operation, it has a little thing. When you pull it out, it makes a signal. That's all I was saying.
Yeah, you could have said a whistle.
You don't pull something out of a whistle. Oh, no, wait. Moving on.
Oof, okay.
With the advent of these kind of emergency skulls with his allies, suddenly these zombie fleets start appearing further and further up and down the coasts of Lustria. And because they always kind of hang around after a victory for a bit of pillaging and theft, suddenly Harkon's empire becomes incredibly wealthy. It gets there's tons of gold and gems, but also magical items start flooding his coffers, and he builds for himself a significant amount of wealth, allowing him then to pay for and bribe other captains and so forth. Then in more recent times, he is allied with a certain mum from evil Canada. Oh, Ben's head whipped up quick there.
10 points if you can remember her name, Ben.
Marathi.
Marathi, well done.
Well done. 5.5 points for you. 5.5 points.
So she's on the lookout, as everyone else who comes to Lustria is, for magical items with which to be able to enhance her power. There's also something else going on that I refuse to be drawn on until we talk about the Dark Elves. So with his assistance, they form this alliance, and with his assistance, they attack the city. Are you ready? Yes. Are you ready? It's a good one.
Here it comes.
Choco-blocks.
Like some sort of off-brand OEM Lego.
Yeah.
It's like Kinder Surprise, but it's Lego Choco-blocks. So, as his undead armies or undead forces are distracting the defenders of Choco-blocks.
Choco-blocks.
Choco-blocks. Cracker Jack.
Their food.
Marathi gets into the heart of the city with her own forces from her Black Arcs. Now, the Black Arcs, if you'll remember from episode 4 or 5 of the intro, these are effectively floating castles. So these were castles that had been built on Ulthuan, which were torn from the bedrock during the Sundering and became the kind of floating palaces of the Dark Elves. She had discovered enough wealth in the heart of Choco-blocks to fill 3 of these arcs to the brim with gold and treasure and lesser magic items. But she was looking for something specific. She was looking for a chest, and I shit you not, full of black pearls. Yep, let's let that one sink in.
Question on this. The 6th edition is when we started seeing a lot more meaningful stuff about the pirates, the zombie pirate coast. Was that in sync with the release of Pirates of the Caribbean, perchance?
Yes.
At the same period? I can't. Pirates of the Caribbean is quite an old series now, isn't it? Yeah. Okay.
I think it was maybe the 2nd or 3rd movie. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Fine.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, maybe Jeff had been to Disney World or Disneyland. I can't remember which it is.
Sure.
The ride on it. Yeah. Whichever one is in California. And for our American listeners, I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. What Harkon comes to realize is that these black pearls would aid him in his restitching of his sanity. And so he begins his march. He begins to attack the Dark Elves who are standing between him and this vault. What Marathi does in a supreme act of fuck you-edness is she reseals the vault without taking the black pearls, because she understands that she would be hounded by vampires and the undead until she managed to get to safety. So she resealed the vault that had these black pearls in it. Now, did she snatch a bag of black pearls? Well, who can say? The vast majority of them, or all of them, were sealed sealed back within the vault of Choco-blocks.
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 Let's all say it together next time. Just count us in next time. We'll just we'll all say it in chorus. Yeah.
As she seals the vault, he himself manages to get to the kind of outer area, the outer catacombs of the vault, and in a battle, a very quick battle, she manages to effectively Sparta kick him into the kind of outer area of the vault, which they then seal again. So he is ultimately trapped within the vault of 3, 2, 1, Chock-a-Block.
Chock-a-Blocks.
Yeah, we'll need to stitch that one because the guys don't
Sounded
understand.
like we were deflating as we said it. Chock-a-Block.
No, it's just, I mean, I
was
know
just
I
getting
was
hungry.
late.
I might go and get
but
some milk and a spoon. Yummy.
Yeah,
I'm going to get some Nestle blocks of chocks.
blocks of chocolate. That's a different thing. And so our story ends with the zombie hordes surrounding an unpronounceable city name, but also their general trapped in the middle. He ultimately gets free, but that's a matter for the end times when we cover it in 2035. So that's effectively the story of the formation of the zombie pirates of the Vampire Coast. Thoughts?
Yeah, lots of thoughts. When are we going to finish the Undead series?
Next episode.
Okay, all right, fine. I was being cheeky. I was expecting a bigger laugh than that. What I got. What I got was nothing.
The Vampire Coast doesn't sound like. I mean, it doesn't sound like a very big area when you say it. It sounds like
Portobello.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a little. It's just a little. It's a peninsula. It's a beach. It's just a beach. That's all it is. Like, is it a big area?
It's several hundred miles in length, so it's
right
where they will have not necessarily cities, but each vampire will set up like a community and will have the undead hordes kind of fashion houses and what have you for them, and or temples, given on how much they wish to be worshipped. But yes, it's not an insignificant size, if we'll say that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Bye.
Interesting.
So do you think that they're going to create a kind of tabletop faction for this? I mean, it sounds like it's kind of gained popularity through the Total War games. Do you think Games Workshop will kind of create a faction, create the models retrospectively?
Yeah. Well, at time of recording, Games Workshop just announced what factions would be the focus for Warhammer the Old World, and it's literally the factions that are in the Old World at this time. So, I mean, not even all of the factions, because the vampire counts aren't being included. The only undead faction is Nehekara, so you're going to have the Tomb Kings of Khemri. There's no Lizardmen, there's no dark elves,
no high elves.
What was really there are some high elves, but because there are some high elf colonies off the coast of the Old World, but there's no. I think what surprised many people is there was no mention of Cathay, which was the huge kind of flagship faction in Total War Warhammer 3. So I think it's doubtful at this stage, and I'm sad to say it, because the vampire counts and their zombie pirate cousins got a bit of a kick in from what will be covered in the older. Now, that's not to say that it won't happen. It's just for the foreseeable future. It doesn't look likely, which is saddened when you consider some of the troop types that they have in the pirate faction, which we will cover now. So the if you imagine the zombie coast, the zombie pirates of the Vampire Coast are by and large an infantry augmented by war beasts and by artillery. So it's things that you would find on or swimming near a galleon. effectively. Their command structure is dolphins, undead
Evil
dolphins. Evil dolphins, or sharks. These are so they have a kind of naval command structure. So everything's referred to as like a fleet captain or an admiral or a commodore or captain, that kind of idea. The kind of head honcho of this is obviously Luthor Harkon, but there are some other named characters which are quite interesting for the faction. The first of which is Silostra Direfin. This is a morbidly obese ghost who looks like an opera singer. She is self-obsessed, and she commands her crew within kind of various lilting or screaming. If you can imagine Ursula from The Little Mermaid, but as an opera singer.
Wow. Direfin's a cool second name, man. That's I like that. Direfin. Also sounds like a medicine, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Give him 15 milligrams of Direfin, stat. And it just makes you sing.
The other kind of two named characters taken from not only from Total War Warhammer 2, but also from a game called Dreadfleet, which was a miniatures game by Games Workshop where you commanded a small fleet of ships. So it's a naval game. And so, interestingly, it's set in the Great Maelstrom, which is a kind of huge area of ocean that has a whirlpool in it that naturally draws the dead towards it. The dead are kind of compelled to some extent to exist there.
Like moths to a flame.
Exactly right. Interestingly, it is at the exact opposite side of the world where the Great Maw of the Ogre Kingdoms are, or is. And that's the miles wide Sarlacc pit. And that area draws the living towards it. So it consumes the living. The Great Maelstrom ultimately consumes the dead. The Great Maelstrom is very much a pocket universe. So it's a naval realm of chaos, although geared more towards the dead than pure forces of chaos. There are malign entities there, but they're all kind of sea creatures, sea drakes,
the krakens,
and the krakens. Exactly right. And from that game, which got ported into, or the characters that got ported into, are Count Noctilus, or Noctilus, I suppose, is the more speedy pronunciation of his name, and who is a vampire pirate who has his own kind of version of a black ark. He was able to draw his castle, his fortress, together with the remains of giant beasts and some other ships to form this massive vessel from which he commands his eponymous Dread Fleet, which is a fleet made up of the dead. So in the Dread Fleet, you have a kind of a tomb barge from Khemri, from Zandri, in Nehekara. You have the Scabarus, which is an anglerfish that's dead that has been taken over by Skaven from Clan Moulder, and so it actually is upside down and rotting and kind of sails the seas. And this is the one that's captained.
Seen an image of that. It's
yes,
wicked.
I've sent that before.
Really cool.
So that's the one that's captained by an undead Skaven.
Cool.
Is it Scabrous or something?
Yes, Scabrous. So you then have an undead, the classic kind of undead floating galleon, which is effectively just a ghost ship. And then you have, oh god, what's it called? The Swordfish, which is a ship, a galleon, captained by a mutant. It's not captained by a member of the undead or someone who is undead. This is a Aranessa Salt Spite. And she is her. If you ever get, I'll put the picture of her in the show notes because she is badass. She's a mutant, so she has her lower arms, her forearms and hands are scaled like a fish and webbed. She has had her legs amputated below the knee, and instead of kind of standard wooden legs, she's replaced them with the sword from a swordfish. So she can, I mean,
Jesus.
You wouldn't go Highland dancing with her. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
Her ship itself has an enormous sword from a swordfish at the front as well for ramming actions. Yeah.
So she hasn't got flat feet. She's just got the tips, the needle tips on her thing. That must be hard to balance. She must be constantly just like moving to adjust her balance.
Oh, yeah.
No, she still wears Nike Air Max. Like, it's a bit of a bitch to tie the shoelace. Like, every time she goes down to do it, she cuts the inside of her arms. Like, well, she would if her arms weren't scaled.
If her arms weren't scaled, yeah. So as for the kind of main forces of the zombie pirates, it is zombie pirates. And there's kind of two broad categories. There are regular zombie pirates who are the kind of brains, armed with melee weapons, close combat weapons. But unusually for an undead force, there's also a significant amount of black powder weapons there. So you've got riflemen, you've got pistoliers, and you've got cannon crews as well. They're not particularly very good, but they are quite eager in terms of shooting.
They've got spirit.
Well, they lack in accuracy. They make up for in can-do attitude.
Can-do attitude.
In spunk.
No.
Not literal. Not literal.
We've discussed that previously. But then you get back into the kind of standard horror tropes. You've got huge bloated corpses that kind of stagger towards the enemy, and they're almost like ogre-sized guys. But if you kill them, they explode and they cover you in
bloaters.
Yes, exactly.
In
right.
party house gunk. Ew!
Yeah,
I've been
confetti.
Yeah.
And then you get into the kind of the standard kind of verminous aspects of the Vampire Count's kind of catalogue of beings. You've got effectively undead wolves that are referred to as scurvy dogs because they're dogs. But then you get like rat swarms. You get what they refer to as
swarms of rats, perchance.
They are swarms of rats, yes. And then
you are on it today, mate.
He's on fire. I wish, literally. They also then
a flambéed crow.
But then they've got what's referred to as deck droppers, which are these great bats, these kind of mutated bats that just kind of hang in the rigging of these ships, and they kind of flow out like a cloud of winged death towards the enemy. So they're pretty great. You then get into the more kind of larger aspects, which are kind of the ones that are seen most notably in the kind of advertising for the zombie pirates factions. You get what's called the Rotting Leviathans. These are crabs. These are giant crabs or krakens that are dead, reanimated, and kind of stumble towards the enemy. These are things that are about the size of, a small cathedral. So they're not insignificant. They're fucking huge, and they're usually covered in zombie gun crews or pirate mobs that will just drop down and start attacking. So
Jesus,
oh wow! So you've got like these giant animated crab things,
like titans.
Yeah,
and they're just and they're festooned with other smaller units.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's
cool.
But
the largest size, as seen in the kind of video promotions for the faction in the game, they're about the size of a small cathedral. Some of them are smaller and what have you, but you can raise a not insignificant number of them in the game.
Amazing.
The final one I wanted to talk about is the thing called a Necrofex Collossus. Now, this sounds
dynamic.
Sounds dynamic. It's a
Necrofex
30.
Collossus.
It's a 30
3,000.
It's a
Coming
it's
soon. I'm done. Carry on.
It's a 30-meter high wicker man made out of ship parts.
He said desperately.
Well, for those listeners familiar with the 40k universe, it's a titan. It's an undead titan made out of the wreckage of 2 or more ships. So its body is the hull. Its arms end in kind of multiple cannons. Again, it's covered in rigging, and but also has huge strips of muscle taken from sea creatures, and bone as well, and carapace from crustaceans.
It's a shit titan.
So it's a horrifying and terrifying thing to face, and it kind of stumbles toward the enemy, blasting them left, right, and center.
Is it mechanical or is it possessed and animated?
It is animated insofar. Think of it like an enormous
puppet,
steampunk zombie.
Okay,
that's how to kind of conceptualize it. There has been at least one instance where there was a vampire. I can't remember if she was a vampire or a wight, who was at the heart of one of these, who was operating it with her as her own body, as it were, and that was
tethered
Leonora.
To it with, like, things and
yes, she was
just a lot of strings.
Yeah,
pulling a lot of strings, isn't it?
Pulling like cords, pushing out organs and things.
Well, hey, maybe if we tie it back to a recent episode of 40k, maybe it's like the Exorcist missile launcher. It's just there's a pirate sitting playing an organ in the middle of this kind of massive
playing Henry Mancini.
Yeah.
So in the instances where it's not being piloted by this individual, is it also carrying, other zombies and gun crews and stuff like the Leviathans?
It can do, yes, because it's obviously it's not only is it kind of a mishmash of muscle and bone and wood, but it's festooned with rigging, and zombies love rigging as much as I like
rigging.
Rigging.
Who doesn't love a bit of rigging?
I do love a bit of rigging. But also it has its own malign intelligence. So when it's not being kind of magically controlled by a being that's inside it, of which I could only find one example.
It really likes crochet.
Yeah, it has someone's kind of, it's possessed, I suppose is the correct way.
What is it like to love? Questions.
Yeah, blam, 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 crash, bash. Somewhat ironically, I can't swim. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah. And I think, lads, that's... I have shot my load in a piratical fashion for the zombie pirates
all over this recording
of the vampire zombie undead coast.
Yeah.
Don't clap yourself. That's just...
Sorry, we'll cut
narcissistical.
I'll tell you what, no, even better, we'll just cut out you and me clapping, and we'll just have Dhar clapping
just
himself.
Because the listener will be able to tell that it's just him clapping.
Yeah.
That is definitely Darren just clapping himself.
That's definitely Darren's clap. Yeah.
Clapping in quotes. So, thoughts, questions?
I think they are the funnest undead faction I've heard. And I feel that was their point. They were inspired from the Disney film, which is a jolly old swashbuckling romp, and I feel that this faction was made in the same kind of spirit and idea, and I really enjoyed them. They're cool. They almost seem quite harmless. You know what I mean? They're quite fun. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Novelty.
I mean, they are undead plus vampires plus ghosts plus various other things, so they don't seem like a barrel of laughs.
Yeah, but it's in a sunny part of the world. It's not like in Sylvania where everything's like raining and night all the time. Everyone's drinking rum. and
It looks
all that
it looks
kind of stuff.
It's idyllic during the daytime, minus of course all the zombies and the undead
Yeah.
and blah blah blah.
Do you get human settlements over in Lustria as well? Are there like human
Yes,
towns
there are
and cities?
there are
and stuff?
several
Okay, cool.
human settlements which we'll cover as we go on. There's a quite famous one. I won't give too much of the game away, but it is a settlement. It's effectively rainforest Amazons.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
Snoo.
No,
Death by snoo.
Do you think there's something kind of slightly more or less threatening about them because they're miles away on the coast of a continent that is entirely populated by human-sized lizards? And whereas, the kind of human populations are kind of predominantly, on a different continent. So they're not as much of a threat, are they? They're like, fuck it. They can hang out over there. That's fine.
Yes.
No?
I think also I don't know much. Most of the lore that we've discussed in the podcast so far has all been on, should we say, the European side, the old world,
Yeah.
right?
100%.
The Empire.
Yeah.
Sorry, the old world is the world. The Empire side, whereas Lustria is still relatively unknown to me and exotic, and like I say, sparse. Like I imagine it's very sparse. I bet it's not, but because we haven't spoke about it, it's like there's Lizardmen, there's Slan, there's a few Hermitaurs, there's a lot of just untouched wilderness and rainforest there.
Yeah.
In my mind, anyway.
You said the old world is the world. That's not technically true, though, is it? Because in Warhammer Fantasy Battle, the old world was that European continent. Is that right?
Yes.
And it's
okay,
but
fine.
the new iteration of Fantasy Battle is called the old world.
Yes, because it's set exclusively in the old world. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So is the new iteration then not going to deal with, evil Canada and Lustria?
I mean, it'll make mention of it from a lore aspect,
but the setting.
But they're not they're not releasing any new figures or any new kind of rules for anything outside of the old world and kind of the Border Prince's Khemri region or Border Prince's Badlands Khemri region. So there are greenskins, there are the undead of Nehekara. There is the Empire, obviously, Bretonia, Wood Elves, High Elves.
Skaven.
No Skaven.
Interesting. What the fuck?
So they'll have the kind of...
You right, Crap?
No, I'm not. There's no Skavan.
There's no Skavan.
Because you keep pronouncing it wrong. That's why.
But they will have, there's dwarves, there's the Forces of Chaos, greenskins, and as I said, the undead. But it's a real kind of shallow roster. In terms of the Skaven, what they've said is at that time, the Skaven were engaged in a civil war.
Oh, okay.
Which is not untrue, I suppose. But it's a weird way to get rid of an empire, an under-empire that spans the entire planet, where a Skaven force could pop up at any minute. Yeah.
They were napping.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like they're setting themselves up for, oh, surprise! We said Skaven weren't coming, but really they are. Here's 400 box sets priced at £1,000 each.
I mean, ish. But what I think is happening is that they are reprinting a lot of the older plastic kits, a lot of the kind of kits that were available in 7th and 8th edition for all of the factions that they've announced. I mean, it's a staggering amount of units, individual units, let alone having to produce 30 to 40,000 of each one. They will be printing continuously or casting continuously for various kind of units and characters. So, yeah, you weren't going to get everything all at once.
Yeah.
For the new game. It'll grow.
There's not enough plastic in the world.
Yeah.
Just to bring it back to the Pirate Vampire Pirates, when you were telling the story of Harkon, do you think there's some influence from from our own history with the Spanish conquistadors and the kind of invasion of was it the Aztecs or the Incas, or maybe both? I can't remember.
Yeah.
I can't remember the era, but yeah, that kind of history, it sounded very similar to that. Only, I guess, because it's, the Lizardmen they have a kind of Aztec sort of
Aztecian
theme to them, don't they?
Yes. Yeah.
And then you have these kind of Westerners invading, albeit undead Westerners.
I mean, from our own kind of history, what they're trying to do is equate the kind of Luthor Harkon arriving in Lustria 400 or 500 years before the conquistadors, that kind of idea, arrive in the Spanish arrive, is that the kind of apocryphal story is that the New World was discovered by Vikings 400 or 500 years before Columbus made his way across. I mean, we'll skip over the fact that there were already significant human kingdoms and empires that existed in the New World.
Yeah. So we say discovered with bunny ears.
Yeah, before a load of people shouted shotgun on something that already existed. Yeah.
Just sailed around the world and put a flag in the ground.
Yeah, so when I was talking about the kind of renewed focus on Lustria in 1492 in that part of the story, that's really when
the shoe.
That's Mr. Magoo, where that's really where the kind of conquistador-y Christopher Columbus aspect comes into it, where there's this renewed invasion by Tilia and Estalia into Lustria to steal the wealth.
Cool, man. Cool. I tell you what, for somebody who turned up late, you've done a cracking job, mate.
Thanks very much. I mean, I would say, don't Google any of this, because I might have just completely made it up.
Because I've been Googling it and I don't trust what it is. Right, shall I wrap up?
Nah.
Tough, I'm wrapping up. All right, that's all from us. Thank you so much for listening. Details and imagery for the topics we've discussed in this podcast can be found on our website at layingdownthelore.com. We also have all our previous episodes on there, release schedules, merchandise, and you can sign up for the Laying Down the Lore newsletter, which includes exclusive info about upcoming releases, behind-the-scenes chat, and some extra lore not covered in the podcast. Big thank you to all our Patreon supporters. We couldn't do this without you guys. You cover our costs and allow us more time planning content. If you're not part of this merry band, you've enjoyed what you've heard in this episode, and you want to support us, head over to patreon.com/laying down the lore and sign up today for as little as £3 measly. This will give you access to our Discord server, so you can come and chat with us directly, and there's an ever-growing pile of exclusive bonus content on there. We'll be back again soon, displaying just how little Chris and I know. Until then, ta-ta.
See you later, I want to suck your blood.
Yar!
Laying down the law.